A luxury car pulls up to a high-security corporate building, and out steps Zhou, a skilled bodyguard, assisting Lin, the blind daughter of the powerful Hong Fu Group chairman. Packed with suspense, drama, and twist, this movie recap will keep you hooked. Don't miss the action, watch to the end. As the duo heads to a crucial meeting in the building, Zhou's phone rings, and it's Lin's fiancé, Qishan, on the line. He is in the hot seat with the board members, and wants to prevent Lin from attending the meeting. However, she is determined to help him, and enters the building. Zhou tries to accompany her, but security prevents him from entering, so he places an alarm device around her neck, telling her to use it if she feels threatened. Following this, Lin is escorted to the meeting room, where the board members are trying to coerce Qishan into doing something against his will. They insist that Lin send a document to transfer company ownership, as they believe a blind person cannot lead the Hong Fu Group. Through their conversation, we learn that her father passed away suddenly. Lin angrily refuses to transfer the ownership, but they physically force her to leave her fingerprint on the document. Panicked, she presses the alarm button, and as soon as she does, Zhou receives a notification and fights his way into the meeting room to rescue her. He then takes Lin to a quiet room, but his actions trigger painful memories of her father's murder. We are then shown a flashback where Lin discovers Zhou threatening her father. This memory makes Lin believe that Zhou might be responsible for her father's death, and she falls unconscious on the spot. In the following scene, Lin wakes up at home, and is startled to find Zhou by her side. She firmly tells him that he's no longer needed, and is fired. However, Zhou plays a recording of her father's voice, revealing that he was hired to protect Lin, and that his contract hasn't expired yet. She believes she saw him on the night of her father's death, so to dispel her suspicions, Lin asks him to remove his clothes so she can examine the wounds on his body. Zhou is puzzled by Lin's request, but after she insists, he reluctantly takes off his shirt, revealing numerous scars on his body. Lin touches one of the scars and becomes even more convinced that he may be the one responsible for her father's death. Frustrated, Zhou takes her hands and guides him across his scarred body, explaining that it's normal for bodyguards to have such scars. Meanwhile, Qishan is beaten up and released by the board members. Lin's best friend Yu is tending to his wounds. Though he tries to keep his distance from her, Yu approaches him, and says that it doesn't matter since his fiancé can't see. Right then, Lin, with some difficulty, makes her way to Qishan, and he quickly assists her. She expresses her suspicions about Zhou, and asks him to call the police. Qishan comforts her and explains that on the day that her father died, she accidentally hit her head, which led to her blindness. He also assures her that there was no one inside her father's room on that day. He then encourages her to take her medication and rest. Later, a sleepless Lin suddenly remembers that her father's study has a surveillance camera, and bolts up to retrieve it. However, Zhou is also in the study trying to find some important documents. Lin enters and initially doesn't notice Zhou, but she accidentally bumps into a bookshelf. Concerned for her safety, he reaches out to protect her, which alerts Lin to his presence, making her even more suspicious of him. Overhearing their conversation, Yu and Qishan arrive at the scene, and ask what happened, but Lin simply asks her fiancé to retrieve the surveillance camera from the bookshelf. This surprises him, and when he hesitates to comply, Zhou takes the camera down and hands it to Lin. Before she has a chance to walk away with it, Yu says that she will watch the footage and tell her what it contains. She then takes the camera and leaves, making Zhou suspicious of her intentions. Later, after watching the video, Yu approaches Lin and explains that the footage only shows her father, Lin Guofua, and no one else. At the same time, Qishan cautiously asks Lin if she knows of any other surveillance cameras in the house, but she denies knowing of any other cameras. Qishan then suggests she get some rest, because it's very late. Late at night, he meets with Yu in private and takes the surveillance footage from her. The letter mentions that she deleted all the potentially harmful footage related to Qishan, and can't understand why he doesn't trust her. Clearly, the two are up to in the next scene. Zhou returns home, and unties his friend, the real Zhou, who is bound to the couch. Here, we discover that the one pretending to be Lin's bodyguard is actually Mo Yao. His father, who was the chairman of King Group, and Lin Guofua were business associates. However, their partnership soured, resulting in the tragic death of Mo Yao's father. Now, our hero wants to find the real cause behind his father's demise. This is why he assumed the identity of his friend, to get close to Lin. The following morning, Yu acts all caring and offers Lin some congee. However, she hands her a bowl that's too hot, causing her to nearly drop it. Later, Lin decides to meet her former house nanny, Wang Ma, for information. As her bodyguard, Mo Yao naturally accompanies her. When they reach Wang Ma's door, Meow senses that something is wrong inside. He asks Lin to wait outside while he investigates. However, there's a trap to ambush them both inside and outside the house. Meow takes care of the attackers inside, but when he tries to find Lin, he realizes that she's surrounded by several dangerous men. Fortunately, he's able to rescue her from the thugs. In the process, however, he receives several cuts to his body. Lin senses fresh blood on his back and faints. Worried, Mo Yao immediately brings her home and contacts the family's private doctor. On the other hand, Chishan blames Yu for letting Lin get into such a dangerous situation. He emphasizes that if anything happens to her, all their efforts will be wasted. In response, Yu reassures him that she has a plan and suggests blaming the whole incident on debt collectors. Once again, it becomes evident that they were the ones who planned the ambush. The next day, while Meow is resting on the couch, Joe approaches him and talks about his loyalty towards Lin. He brings up the incident from 2 years ago, where Mo Yao nearly died trying to save Lin, and now he's injured again. However, Mo Yao doesn't want his friend to interfere and asks him to leave. In the following scene, he teaches Lin to eat on her own, and she quickly learns to negotiate the utensils by herself. Mo Yao is pleased with her progress, but still suggests she be cautious with the people around her. Just then, a servant informs him that Chishan has arrived with the funeral home staff to discuss Lin's father's burial arrangements. At the meeting, Mo Yao suggests the West Mountain, pointing out a location halfway up the hill with a beautiful view, and Lin agrees to it. Following the burial ceremony, Lin mournfully touches her father's portrait and cries. To lift her spirits, Mo Yao brings her a bowl of tofu soup and begins sharing how he felt when his father died. Upon discovering that Mo Yao has also lost his father, Lin wants to know more, but he doesn't want to discuss it. As their conversation unfolds, Lin expresses her determination to find her father's murderer. Mo Yao asks if she suspects him, but she doesn't give a clear answer. The next day, a servant hands Lin a flash drive stating that someone dropped it off and left without explanation. Lin asks if the person said anything, and the servant replies that the person uttered one cryptic sentence, "Joe is not Joe." Following this, Lin hands the USB drive to Yu, asking her to help view the content. Yu inserts the USB drive into her computer and discovers information about a bodyguard named Mo Yao. The file contains details about his height, weight, and educational background but lacks a photograph. It does, however, mention surgery and a scar on his lower abdomen. Later in the evening, Lin sits on the couch, patiently awaiting Mo Yao's arrival. When he shows up, she invites him to join her for a drink. Mo Yao quickly becomes inebriated and lies motionless on the couch. Using this opportunity, Lin unbuttons his shirt and begins moving her hand downward to check the scar on his abdomen. However, Mo Yao regains his senses and stops her. Panicked, Lin says that she only wants to confirm his true identity, as she is fed up with all the mystery surrounding her father's death. Hearing this, Mo Yao finally comes clean and admits that he's not Joe. He is also adamant that he had no role in her father's death. He tells her that she can dismiss him at any time, but the people around her may not be trustworthy. When Lin asks who he's referring to, he doesn't answer and walks away. Back at home, Mo Yao and Joe get into a heated discussion about why he revealed his true identity. Here we learn that Joe was adopted by Mo Yao's father, and the two are like brothers. Because of this, Joe feels it's his responsibility to take care of Mo Yao. However, the latter warns him not to interfere, and instead hands him a set of numbers to investigate. The following day, Mo Yao takes Lin to meet Wang Ma. The nanny gets straight to the point and reveals that on the day of her father's death, Chishan and Yu were with him in his study. This shocks Lin, and she realizes that her fiancé and Yu lied about the surveillance footage. They had claimed that the camera didn't show anyone else in the room. After this, Mo Yao drives Lin back home, and she finally apologizes to him. Later, as Mo Yao is changing his clothes, Lin abruptly barges into the room and says that she wants to drink. When he refuses to join her, she starts drinking alone and expresses feeling deceived by Yu. He then asks if she has any doubt about her fiancé at all. Lin insists that Chishan loves her deeply and would never betray her. He even risked his own life to save her after a car accident a few years ago, leaving him scarred. He then asks if the person who saved her really was Chishan. He also learns that the person responsible for the hostile takeover of the Qin family's assets is Jean Gufu's confidant, Liao Wanshan. Later at night, as Chishan and Yu are sleeping together, Lin comes over, startling them. She asks them for the surveillance footage from the study, but they claim to have already thrown it away. Hearing this, Lin is convinced Yu is lying, so she decides to investigate her. Mo Yao offers to help and he takes her to Zhou, who is good at investigating. On the other hand, when Chishan learns that Lin has gone out with Mo Yao, he gets nervous and keeps trying to call her, but none of his calls go through. When she returns, Chishin harshly berates her for trusting Mo Yao too much and going out in the middle of the night, but our girl warns him that she can do as she damn well pleases. After she's gone, Chishin pulls Mo Yao aside and reveals that he knows he's the son of the Qin group's owner. Chishin then questions his motives for working as a bodyguard for the Lin group. In reply, our hero casually mentions that he, just like Chishin, is there to make money from the Lin family, but he has modest demands and is content with a tenth of what Chishin would receive. However, Mo Yao warns both Chishin and Yu not to harm Lin in any way while pursuing their financial interests. He asserts that he won't hesitate to take action against them if necessary. In the next scene, Lin Guofu's lawyer seeks out Mo Yao and transfers 51% of its shares to his name. This is because Lin Guofu fell guilty of the forceful acquisition of the Qin group. Later, when Mo Yao meets Zhou, the latter reveals that he possesses proof of Lin Guofu's wrongful takeover of the Qin group. This information could potentially bankrupt the Lin family. However, Mo Yao refuses to take legal action, stating that Lin would be the one to suffer the consequences. He then asks Zhou to just drop the matter and leave it alone. Next, Mo Yao visits Lin in her room, and she recognizes him immediately by his distinct scent. This makes her smile, indicating that she has started to fall for him. The following day, Lin receives a call from Zhou who says that he has collected information about Yu and asks to meet. Mo Yao has gone to see a sick mother, so Lin meets up with Zhou without informing him. Afterward, Zhou escorts her to an underground parking lot where two hired thugs intimidate and try to frighten her. He wants to convince her to fire Mo Yao. Although his actions were intended to be harmless, Zhou doesn't know that these two men have also been paid by Yu, and after he leaves, the men approach our girl and begin harassing her. Later, Mo Yao returns from the hospital and through Zhou, discovers that Lin is in the underground parking garage. Worried, he rushes to the scene, but by the time he arrives, the two thugs have already removed her coat. Enraged, Mo Yao swiftly subdues them and forces them to reveal who hired them, a woman wearing a diamond necklace. As soon as Lin hears this, she realizes that the description of the woman matches her close friend, Yu. Afterward, Zhou and Mo Yao confront the backstabbing bitch. Zhou suggests undressing her as a form of retaliation, but Mo Yao refuses, opting not to stoop to her level. Instead, he smashes Yu's phone and instructs her to leave. Seeing this, Zhou believes that Mo Yao has become emotionally attached to Lin. He raises concerns about how she might react if she learns that her father caused Mo Yao's father's death. In response, our hero says that they must never let her find out. Afterwards, upon learning about Yu's actions, Chishin reprimands her for her reckless behavior. Later, Lin also questions her about her recent stay at the house and whether she's hiding something. Although Yu pretends not to understand, Lin directly confronts her about her intentions. She brings up the confessions of the two thugs from earlier, who stated that a woman with a blue heart-shaped necklace had given them orders. This revelation leaves Yu panicked and unsure how to respond. Right then, Chishin arrives, takes Lin aside, and plays a recording of Mo Yao. In it, the latter is allegedly conspiring against the Lin family. Upon hearing Mo Yao's voice, Lin is devastated and says she needs time alone to contemplate and discern who is telling the truth. Later, as she is taking a shower, Lin can't help but dwell on the words of Chishin and Mo Yao echoing in her mind. This makes her increasingly agitated. Unfortunately, as she gets dressed and exits the bathroom, she accidentally slips and hits her head on the bathtub. Mo Yao hears the commotion and rushes in to find her lying on the floor. He lifts her gently and places her on the bed. Lin, who is in a lot of pain, softly questions why he is hiding things from her. When she asks if he's plotting to gain her family's wealth, Mo Yao remains silent. As a result, she gets angry and asks him to leave. This upsets Mo Yao, and he storms out in frustration, slamming the door behind him. Lin doesn't try to stop him, and because of her throbbing head, she closes her eyes to rest. Surprisingly, when she reopens them, she can see. Filled with excitement, she approaches her former bedroom, and unexpectedly hears intimate sounds coming from inside. When she opens the door, she sees Yu and Chishin in a compromising situation. Suppressing her resentment and pain, Lin pretends that she still can't see, and lies that she had a bad dream that jolted her awake. She then expresses her wishes to always have the two by her side. Yu readily agrees, and as Lin turns to feel her way out, the cheating bastards continue to make out. After stepping out, Lin can no longer contain her despair and anger, and tears stream down her face. She then realizes why Mo Yao always warned her to be cautious of the people around her. In the next scene, Mo Yao is taking a bath when Lin arrives outside his door. She tells him that her vision has been restored, and that she caught Chishan and Yu betraying her. However, when she sees Mo Yao's face, she immediately recognizes him as the person who'd had a confrontation with her father. Mo Yao explains that things are not as they seem. He was paid by Chishan to change her father's will, but he never laid a finger on him. Despite this, Lin insists that Mo Yao is responsible for her father's death, and asks why he didn't admit it earlier. When she grows increasingly angry, Mo Yao suddenly kisses her. He then mentions that the situation is very complicated and doesn't want Lin to get dragged into it. However, she remains stubborn and walks away. After she leaves, Mo Yao drowns his sorrows in alcohol, and Zhou tries to convince him to quit his job guarding Lin. However, Lin thinks that Chishan is now a greater threat to Lin now that she can see. The following morning, Lin awakens and her servant requests her presence downstairs. He informs her that Mr. Chishan has brought a lawyer and wants her to sign the will. Li ponders whether Mo Yao's words are true, and decides to go downstairs to find out. She pretends to still be blind, and when the lawyer reveals the contents of her father's will, she notices Chishan's shock. He keeps saying that the will is wrong, and Lin realizes that what Mo Yao had told her was indeed true. Eventually, the lawyer reads the will, which only mentions 60 million won in cash and 3 houses. It doesn't mention any shares from the Hongfu Group, which he personally created. Hearing this, Chishan looks disappointed, and Lin calmly stamps her hand. She then asks the lawyer who the shares were transferred to. The latter states that he lacks information on that, and that it's above his pay grade. Later, while walking down the road, Zhou intercepts Lin and makes some comment about her eyes being healed, but her heart is still blind. He says that she can't see the lengths Mo Yao has gone for her. In reply, Lin explains that it's merely a bodyguard job, and there's no need for his concern. But Zhou angrily retorts that Mo Yao deeply cares for her because he has feelings for her. Lin is stunned by this revelation, and Zhou hands her the USB drive containing the information collected on Yu. He then leaves, saying he hopes to never see her again. At his house, Mo Yao is drinking alcohol, and the room is in shambles. Suddenly, Lin calls him, saying she's outside. Mo Yao hastily opens the door, and when she enters, she asks him to sign an agreement. She wants to hire him as her personal assistant from now on. Mo Yao questions why she decided to trust him again, and Lin responds by saying that if he had ill intentions, he would have acted on them already. She also mentions that Zhou outed him about his feelings for her. Hearing this, Mo Yao blushes and admits that he indeed likes her. After this, Lin questions him about Shirshan's potential involvement in her father's death. Mo Yao believes it's highly likely, given Shirshan's recent change to the will, and the expedited burial of her father. Hearing this, Lin is determined to find evidence, as she refuses to believe that a murder could happen without leaving any traces. She then tells Mo Yao to keep her recovery a secret. In the next scene, we see Yu and Shirshan having a romantic time at home. Suddenly, Mo Yao guides Lin into the room, catching the two off guard. Shirshan questions why Lin is still keeping Mo Yao around, and she explains that she wants to give him a chance to prove himself. Shirshan argues it's dangerous to have him, but Lin insists that she isn't afraid, because her two supporters are there to look out for her. The scene then shifts to Lin's birthday, where Yu presents her with an expensive gift. However, Lin mentions that her favorite gift is the engagement ring given to her by Shirshan, the one with the square diamond. Yu tries to hide the ring on her hand, but the guests have already noticed it. Mo Yao then swiftly takes the ring from her, and gives it to our girl. Heartbroken, Lin accuses her friend of stealing her engagement ring, and questions if she wants her fiancé too. Yu is deeply embarrassed by this and she looks to Shirshan for help, but he remains silent, so she flees the scene without uttering a word. After the party, when only Lin and Mo Yao remain, he can't help but admire her acting skills. Despite Yu's betrayal, Lin wants to keep her and Shirshan around to let them make their own mistakes. Mo Yao is somewhat anxious, but Lin is confident that Yu will come to her, begging. As anticipated, she arrives in tears, pleading with Lin to let her stay, because she has nowhere else to go, promising to be a better person from now on. Later, Yu confronts Shirshan, upset that he distanced himself from her, and didn't back her when she needed it. He defends himself by saying that he couldn't intervene under those circumstances. There were simply too many people, and he didn't want to arouse any suspicions. Following this, the two discuss how to get rid of Mo Yao, believing that today's incident was orchestrated by him. Yu also suspects that Lin has completely regained her eyesight. Later in the evening, Lin sneaks into Shirshan's room to search for evidence against him. There she finds a substantial insurance policy that he took out on her, with the intention of profiting from her death. As she's about to take a picture of it, she hears Shershan and Yu enter the room, so she quickly hides behind a screen. The two of them discuss how to transfer the 60 million yuan Lin inherited ASAP, fearing it might become impossible if she regains her eyesight. Right then, Shershan notices that someone has tampered with his documents and begins searching the room. He approaches the screen where Lin is hiding, freaking her out. But with perfect timing, Mo Yao bursts into the room, questioning Shershan about the people who came earlier. He also lures him outside the room to discuss a major business deal downstairs. After the coast is clear, a furious Lin walks out of the room. Downstairs, Mo Yao confronts Shershan and calls him out for his intentions to transfer Lin's money. After this, he exits the room and goes straight to meet Lin and reminds her not to take any risk. In reply, a frustrated Lin states that Shershan and his cohorts are trying to harm her. Mo Yao comforts her, assuring her that she isn't alone and that he will protect her. Meanwhile, Yu discovers that 51% of the shares have been transferred to Mo Yao, and she shares this information with Shershan. He then confronts Mo Yao and threatens to report him for fraud. However, our hero calmly hands his phone to Shershan, suggesting he should call the police, while pointing out that before Lin Guofu was buried, Lin kept a log of his hair, which will reveal the cause of death. Later, Lin, Mo Yao, and Zhou watch the surveillance cameras. As expected, she notices Shershan sneaking into her room to look for her father's hair sample. While it's clear that he's involved with her father's death, there is no actual proof. Sensing Lin's anxiety, Mo Yao reassures her that they will find the proof they need. Later, Lin goes to Shershan's room to look for evidence. Unfortunately, he walks in and catches her in the act. Lin covers her ass by saying that she came to retrieve a seal, but Shershan is increasingly suspicious of her. He uses a pen to test her sight, but she calmly and convincingly deceives him into believing that she's still blind. After a while, Mo Yao arrives and whisks Lin away to a parking lot. He scolds her for taking such risks alone. In reply, Lin kisses him, explaining that she doesn't want him to be in danger because of her. At that moment, a man wearing a hat and a mask arrives. Sensing the danger, Mo Yao instructs Lin to quickly get in the car and drive away. He then turns around and rushes towards the man. As the two engage in a fight, Mo Yao's arm is injured, but before the man can cause any more damage, Lin drives up with blinding headlights and a blaring horn. Compromised, the man runs away. Lin then gets out of the car, helps Mo Yao, and quickly drives away. Once back at their residence, she affectionately tends to his wounds. During this, Mo Yao warns Lin, saying that if something happens to him, she should give up her search and stay away from Jishan. However, our brave girl assures him that she won't let anything happen to him. In the next scene, Mo Yao kicks down Jishan's door and confronts him, demanding to know why he is targeting him. Jishan coldly replies that he should consider himself lucky, because his mother might not get so lucky. This triggers Mo Yao, who smashes the wine bottle on the table, ready to attack Jishan's neck. However, the coward offers a solution. If Mo Yao transfers the company shares to him and leaves Lin immediately, he will call off the Jingxing Society goons he hired to kill Mo Yao. After the confrontation, Mo Yao returns to Lin's room and finds her waiting for him with a birthday cake. Our hero is deeply touched by this gesture, as it has been many years since he last celebrated his birthday. She then kisses him, and finally, the two put aside their reservations and share their true feelings. Following this, Mo Yao changes his clothes and prepares to go out. Lin notices a long scar on his lower back and asks about it. Mo Yao recalls a time when he saw Lin in a car accident and risked his life to rescue her from the wreckage, injuring himself on the shattered glass. However, he doesn't tell her this and lies, saying that it's a childhood injury caused by misadventures. Lin then declares that she wants to watch the sunset with him, just like her father used to do when he was alive. Mo Yao silently hugs her, and Lin kisses him again, this time making her feelings clear. The next morning, Lin wakes up and finds a letter on her bedside table. It's a brief message from Mo Yao, asking her to take care of herself. Lin panics and searches everywhere, but she can't find Mo Yao. She tries calling him, but his phone is turned off. Desperate, she sends him voice messages pleading with him to return. Meanwhile, he's having breakfast with Zhou. The letter advises him not to put his life at risk, but Mo Yao doesn't listen. He knows how the Jingxing Society work. He has to withstand 3 attacks to lift the threat on Lin. Mo Yao then gives Zhou some instructions and asks him to take care of his mother and protect Lin. In the next scene, Mo Yao engages in 3 rounds of life and death battles with the members of the Jingxing Society, suffering severe injuries in the process. The members of the Jingxing Society admire him, having never encountered an opponent quite like him before. Later, when an exhausted Mo Yao sits down on the ground, he gets a call from Zhou, asking him to come home as soon as possible. When he arrives home, he finds Lin and Zhou shit-faced. As he stares at them in disbelief, Zhou departs, asking our hero to take care of his girl. Lin then hugs Mo Yao tightly, and during this, she notices his necklace, the same necklace worn by the man who saved her from the car accident. It finally dawns on Lin that the person who rescued her was none other than Mo Yao. When confronted, he explains that he kept it from her because he didn't want the fact that he'd saved her to cloud her emotions. Lin assures him that her love doesn't stem from any kind of rescue. She tells him that she trusts him completely, and no matter what, she will believe in him. The next morning, Lin wakes up early to prepare breakfast for the two of them. Mo Yao hugs her from behind and playfully suggests they finish what they didn't complete the previous night. However, Lin becomes shy and dekes him out, saying she'll make him coffee. Following this, while getting coffee beans from the living room cabinet, she stumbles upon Mo Yao and her dad's equity transfer agreement. There is also a diary written by Mo Yao, which mentions how he studied Lin's preferences to gain her trust. This new revelation devastates her, and she asks Mo Yao why he did this. In response, he explains that things were complicated back then, and Lin's father did transfer the shares to him. As far as the rest goes, he feels something is amiss, and wants to investigate thoroughly. Seeing that Mo Yao is still hiding something from her, Lin feels conflicted and decides to leave. All Mo Yao can do is watch her leave with teary eyes. Next, Lin returns home, and looks through some old photo albums. There she sees a picture of her father, and behind it is a message left by Mo Yao, suggesting she choose the people around her very wisely. Lin then realizes that Mo Yao deeply cares for her, but doesn't understand why he hasn't been able to show it. The following morning, Lin wakes to find Yu standing by her bed. The letter reveals that she visited the hospital, and discovered that Lin has regained her eyesight. Hearing this, our heroine glares at her, dropping the facade and telling her that she is well aware of Yu's affair with Qishan. Surprisingly, the Ho admits it without any shame. A puzzled Lin states that she's always treated her like a sister, not a subordinate. Unable to tolerate Lin any longer, Yu snaps. She reveals that Mo Yao used to be in the upper crusades society until Lin Gufo took control of King Group, causing Mo Yao's father to take his own life, which led to the family's bankruptcy. Meanwhile, Qishan contacts the Jinxing Society, and learns that their plan has failed. It dawns on him that Mo Yao's initial cooperation was just a ruse to buy some time. Now, having mortgaged his remaining shares for a high-interest loan, he's left with no money. Desperate, Qishan decides to seek forgiveness from Lin. He claims that Yu orchestrated everything, and his real intentions were simply to get to know Lin. However, our heroine sees through his bullshit and calls him out. She accuses him of having a hand in her father's death, which became obvious when he tried to steal his evidentiary hair. Qishan realizes that she had set a trap for him, but nonetheless, he smiles, assuming that she has no evidence against him. Lin then boldly tells him that all the evidence will eventually come to light. Qishan snaps, pins her to the couch, and just as he's about to strike her, Mo Yao arrives. The two face off, and with an evil grin on his face, Qishan says, "The game has just begun." After he departs, an irate Mo Yao removes the surveillance camera from Lin's room. He is fed up with her taking risks in order to get Qishan to say or do something incriminating. The next morning, Lin wakes up to find Mo Yao is gone and believes that he has left for good this time. This obviously makes her sad, but she reasons that it might be for the best. Right then, she receives a call from Zhou, who asks her to come to his place ASAP. When she arrives, Zhou admits that Mo Yao was injured defending her, and he arrived home drenched in the rain and collapsed. Worried, Lin rushes upstairs to find him resting. Seeing her distress, he realizes how much she cares for him. The two then set aside their differences and embrace. Due to his weakened state, Mo Yao falls asleep, while Lin receives a text message, and opts to meet Qishan alone. In his car, Qishan continues to question her about her relationship with Mao, but Lin remains steadfast. Seething with hatred, Qishan swears revenge against Mo Yao, but Lin warns him against it, saying that she can provide evidence of his culpable involvement in a murder. Qishan smiles wickedly and claims that he has already destroyed all the evidence. He then reveals that he possesses enough evidence of Mo Yao's embezzlement to ensure his imprisonment. Lin asks what he wants, and Qishan shamelessly says that he wants them to get married. Meanwhile, Mo Yao wakes up to Lin's absence. This sends him into a panic, so he rushes downstairs in search of her. When he sees Lin returning with groceries, he embraces her tightly, fearful that she might ultimately vanish from his life. Lin also clings to him and expresses her desire to make amends for him. Next, she seeks out Yu and puts an end to their 20-year-long friendship with a resounding slap. She then takes the engagement ring Qishan gave her, and hands it to Yu, telling her to keep it. Elsewhere, Joe finally uncovers the truth. He learns that the true instigator behind the hostile takeover of the Qin group was not Lin Guofu, but his deputy, Liao Winshan. It turns out that Liao Winshan is Qishan's foster father. Armed with evidence, Mo Yao confronts Yu about her involvement with Qishan and blackmails her into handing over the surveillance videos from Lin Guofu's study the day of his death. Yu agrees to cooperate, but she doesn't want to hand over the surveillance footage, which clearly holds a massive secret. The following day, Qishan's company receives a legal notice that their contract has been cancelled due to fraudulent activities. Enraged, Qishan confronts Mo Yao, blaming him and threatening to retaliate against him and Lin. Meanwhile, Yu watches the footage from the study, finally revealing what happened on that fateful day. The old man earnestly implored Qishan to leave his job. The old man earnestly implored Qishan to leave his daughter. The latter, however, violently pushed Ling Wufo to the ground, leading to a heart attack that ultimately caused his death. Right then, Qishan confronts Yu, accusing her of betrayal due to her alliance with Miao, which is causing his financial losses. Yu swiftly denies the accusations, but Qishan points out that only she knew about the things that Miao is now using against him. He wants the video footage from the study, but when she refuses, Qishan violently assaults her. He drags her by her hair, smashes her head with a vase, killing her. Later at night, Ling invites Miao to have a drink, and he asks about her unusual behavior. She explains that it's been a while since they shared a drink. They then joke about the time she got him drunk in order to verify his identity. After a good laugh, Ling expresses her frustrations about not being able to bring Qishan to justice. Despite knowing the truth, he is still roaming around a free man. In response, Miao reassures her that they will eventually find the evidence to hold Qishan accountable for his crimes. After throwing back a few too many, Miao passes out. Ling gently kisses him, determined to meet with Qishan and end this once and for all. The next day upon waking up, Ling notices Miao's absence and finds a note beside her table. The note tells her not to be so obvious the next time she decides to drug him. He promises to return soon and urges her to wait in the room until then. Alarmed, Ling rushes to open the door but finds it locked. She then calls the police for assistance, claiming that she is stuck. Elsewhere, Miao arrives at an abandoned warehouse, which is supposed to be the meeting place for Qishan and Ling. The evil guy isn't surprised at all, as he knows Miao won't stay idle when Ling is in trouble. Qishan cockily states that since Miao has now come, he won't leave alive. He then discloses his plan to take over the Qin family. Realizing the depths of Qishan's treachery, Miao clenches his teeth, but before he can make a move, a dozen or so henchmen appear behind Qishan. Regardless, Miao removes his clothes and prepares to fight. Meanwhile, Zhou visits Yu and discovers her lifeless body in her room. She is still clutching the pen drive containing the crucial surveillance camera footage. Zhou promptly takes the card and contacts the police to report the incident. Back at the warehouse, Miao fights valiantly, despite being outnumbered and stabbed in the abdomen. Qishan approaches him for a final strike, but Ling arrives in the nick of time and saves him. Enraged, Qishan grabs her and holds her at knife point. He then forces Miao to kneel before him and beg for her safety. Seeing his arch-nemesis kneel before him in this manner, Qishan feels immense satisfaction. He watches the tragic couple and laughs maniacally, believing he has complete control. However, Miao summons his strength, grabs Qishan's wrist holding the dagger, and stabs him in the chest. Witnessing both of them bleeding profusely, Ling calls an ambulance and holds Miao tight. In the final scene, we learn that Qishan survived the stab wound, but justice is served when he is sentenced to death for homicide, robbery, fraud, and racketeering. Meanwhile, Ling fusses over a bouquet of white chrysanthemums before she goes to visit her father's grave. Miao is waiting for her with an umbrella. She then takes his arm, and together, they visit her father's grave. The drama ends with the couple finally finding the peace they always wanted. Thanks for watching this recap. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next movie recaps. Stay tuned for more exciting recaps.